The heat lay over the yard like a hammered sheet, bright as a coin, warping the air above the sand into wavering glass. At the center of the circle, a man breathed slow, steady as a bellows before dawn. The spear in his hand was lacquered a dark red all along the haft. It balanced against his palm with the exact familiarity of a limb, a thing long ago adopted and never set down. He rolled his shoulders once, feeling the leather creak. Sunlight climbed the blade's leaf-shaped tip and pooled there. He had slept badly, or rather he had not slept at all, but he felt clean. He had washed in water scented with orange blossom and willow bark until the city's grime ran away in swirls. Even now, beneath the leather and linen and rings of mail, there was the faint cooling of astringent leaves on his skin. He was thin and brown and loose as a cat, with the lazy smile of a man who might be bored at any moment. Across from him, the monster stood as if planted, armor black as if the forge's smoke had seeped into the metal and lived there. A great shield, a great sword. The eyes behind the visor were not visible. There was only a rectangle of darkness where a face ought to be. He was taller than any man had a right to be, and wider too, his bulk casting a shadow like a door ajar. He was growth and mass and bad dream. "Your Grace," someone murmured far away and above. "My lords, the gods watch." They always watch, Oberyn thought, with no troubled feeling at all, because gods did not care, and he had never asked them to. He lifted the spear and stepped sideways. The heat carried the city's odors up over the battlements. Tar, fish, horse, the sour wet of the river, the faint sweetness from the gardens behind the keep walls. King's Landing was a place of many mouths and not enough water. It rustled and moaned and belched even when the court held its breath. He did not look up. He knew where eyes were. He could feel particular gazes like pressure on his skin. The cool, deliberate weight from the upper pavilion where the man in black and gold sat, hands folded. The quick, hot flicker from the queen next to him. The more complicated warmth of the Kingslayer, whose golden head tilted a little, curious, reluctant, recognizing grace and disliking it in the man who wielded it. The weight that meant Tyrion Lannister, low and watchful, very still. The softer tremor of Valeria's breath somewhere to his left. A wind across dune grass, if dune grass could speak a name without sound. Gregor Clegane shifted, the sand under his sabatons grinding. The black sword came up in a smooth, hideous display of inevitability, point sinking toward the earth as if to say, "I will put you under it." Oberyn smiled. He planted the spear with a little tap in the sand, spun it, the shaft flickering between his hands in a motion like wringing water from cloth. He let his wrists lead and his feet follow. The monster stepped in, the sword rising, and the Dornishman flowed sideways and back with scarcely any expenditure of effort. He flicked the spear tip against the black shield, just the kiss of metal on metal to taste the distance, to taste the rhythm. The tiny ring of the strike leapt up into the air and died. "Stand still," a voice like a cave said from inside the helmet. It folded around the words as though the words were rocks torn from the ground and thrown, and the voice had to be careful not to swallow pieces of them. Oberyn did not answer. He let the spear talk. The spear was conversation his whole body loved. It had spoken first to him when he was a boy and the city guard had shut the gates of Sunspear in his face for sneaking back in at night drunk on fig wine and spooning laughter. The spear had murmured to him over 1,000 mornings and afternoons since, each stroke and circle a syllable. Now he tapped and lunged and recovered, each tick of the spear an insult, a memory, a carved letter in the name of Elia and her children. He did not say her name out loud. He knew the limits of the yard, of the empire of sand he had always ruled, and he knew his voice would grow too loud if he let it, and he would step too close and give that door shadow the length of his arm. Gregor's sword came in high and wide and faster than a thing so heavy ought to travel. It hissed. Oberyn ducked his head and let it split air above him like a drawn line. He answered with a jab and a low sweep, the smooth tempo of his breaths marking time. The tip found the seam between cuisses and greave and kissed there, and he felt the thrum of a target met. The giant moved with a grunt like the earth muttering to itself. The spear whispered close to the knee again and then retraced. Oberyn stepped out and spun, the ferrule glancing against sand in a circle that carved the memory of an orange sun. "Your blade is poisoned," the Kingslayer murmured up in his pavilion to no one in particular. Oberyn did not hear him. He was counting. He had always loved numbers. He counted beats between breaths of the man behind the visor. He counted how many times the sword came all the way back to guard, less often now. He counted how many beads of sweat broke free and ran under his collar and down his chest. 3 at first, now more. He counted the ghost weights of old wounds in his own back, and where each one tugged at him when he turned. He counted the times he had failed to strike in this exact space. He promised himself to subtract nothing from the total he desired. The monster stamped forward, 1, 2, 3, and Oberyn read a certain impatience there and a smear of fear under it, and he gave the fear more to eat. He pricked with the spear and retreated each time the sword tried to pin him, to trap him against shield and wall. But the yard was broad, and he grew broader still by moving as water, and soon Gregor Clegane had become a bull in a ring with no edges. "Cast down!" someone shouted, young and eager and paid to scream. The crowd repeated it, fractured and vari. At the syllables clattering, Oberyn lanced straight through the noise, the tip of his spear slipping under the arm and into a seam that leaked. The giant barked. Oberyn went back one long stride, then another, his spear held at a height that would drag the eye, while his gaze dropped to the feet instead. When the black blade scythed past his face, he felt the brief cold of its shadow like a winter bird. "Confess," Oberyn said then, finally, because he wanted the word in his mouth, to taste the way it felt shaped by his tongue today. It was not a shouting word. It was a word for closed rooms and cups of sour wine and someone's bare shoulders at the window. "Make it clear." The monster made a sound that might have been a laugh if a laugh had rockfall in it. He lunged, that huge sword writing an inconvenient letter across the air. Oberyn slid aside, the haft singing. He let the spear kiss the helmet's cheek as one kisses a corpse goodbye. The leather in his glove protested. He withdrew. He waited. Up above, Tywin Lannister did not shift in his chair. He did not speak. He did not blink much. He had bet his own name on iron, and he understood iron's mood poorly when it took a wound. He ran long parachutes of thought in his mind, as he always did, and each line ended with the same rising curve. Dornish prince impaled on Lannister justice, justice so heavy the word itself bent. He had prepared letters for both outcomes because to men like him, a body on sand was a figure in a column first, a red smear under sums. But he preferred one letter, the one with the neat salutation he had rehearsed many times in his mind, to His Grace the King. Cersei beside him did blink. Her mouth was just a little open. She could smell the orange blossom on the man below. It offended her. She had imagined his scent otherwise, spiced sweat, some unfamiliar cinnamon or unwholesome resin, something foreign and therefore contemptible. Perfume on a battlefield seemed to her like laughter at a funeral. How dare he? The thought came without form in her mind. A pulse. How dare he be graceful in the city that was supposed to be hers like a dress? She squeezed her fingers on the arm of her chair and found the ridge of a fissure in the carved wood and thought of her son. And underneath that, for the first time, a thin, careful thread of fear. If this man walks away, Tyrion walks also. Tyrion's drink had been water. It dropped down his throat and settled in him like a small cold stone. He watched and hated that he had to watch. He tried to think of a joke and failed. A joke would have been armor. He had none. He had once said something glib about a small chance being better than none at all. It was cheap bravado then, and now he knew how true and how flimsy truth could be. He watched the Dornishman's feet because that was the right thing to watch, and tried not to imagine how skulls sounded between gauntlets. Illyria Sand stood with her palms together, thumbs against her lower lip, as if in prayer, though she was not praying. Her eyes were wet though hardly anyone would have noticed, because she wore wet well. She held herself completely still to keep from making a noise that would clip and fall awkwardly into silence, and to keep from calling his name in front of these pale, tight-mouthed people who had taken a child and strangled him while his sister was screaming, back in a city that had always pretended to be civilized only because it preferred pretty lies to ugly ones. On the sand, the spear tip made its final argument. Oberyn saw it before it came, the moment that kills men like him. The perfect shape of a victory he wanted too much. He saw the way the giant swayed and accommodated his own weight badly on that wounded leg. He saw the gap that opened above the breastplate's edge when the shield arm lifted to ward the next strike, the little crescent of exposed meat as irresistible as a throat. He saw the entire past and future arranged around the arc of his leap. He also saw, sharply and with almost comic clarity, a memory. His oldest sister tucking a loose curl behind her ear and scolding him for climbing, because he always looked where he wanted to be rather than where his foot would land. He did not leap. He stepped in once only, low and quick, and drove the spear at an angle none but men who had prepared for years in heat learn. The tip skated, tussled with steel, and found the gap under the arm. He turned his wrist and pushed. The spear bit, a bit deep. The resistance felt like gristle and old oaths. The monster's breath stopped for a terrible instant, then resumed on a smaller scale, as if he had forgotten how. No shouting. Oberyn did not look into the visor slit for any confession. He did not walk around the big man and gloat and demand names. The poison in the spear would do that work or not, and if not, iron would. He did not care to allow anything but necessity. He stepped back still, patient, and kept the spear ready to punish. When the great sword rose again, it wavered. When it fell wide. The shield sagged. Oberyn took one more step and ended it with clean economy. A straight thrust under the jaw where the gorget had shifted. The spear entered, spoke briefly with cartilage, and when it came back wet, it did so without flourish. Gregor Clegane took one blind, vast step forward as if late for something, and then he went to his knees, an incomprehensible animal having found the bottom of its own strength. He fumbled, as a child fumbles at a toy, and then his hands let the sword go. The crash of it was surprisingly small. The man swayed for a long second. Oberyn watched his throat move twice. Watched, waited. He placed his boot on the man's breast and, with a spare twist of the spear inside the ruin of the neck, opened something that could not be closed. The sound that came out was not a roar. It was the soft sound of liquid seeking a lower place. The giant pitched forward. Sand took his face. Gently. Silence. Silence stupid and too large for the yard, broken only by a cough somewhere and the scrape of a chair leg a long way off. There was always a moment after the end of violence where people cannot remember how to be ordinary, and they stand with their mouths a little open, and they look at one another as if practicing for a different life. Past. A noise began at the far edge of the yard, unsure and relieved and slightly unclean, and rebounded and came back and swelled. Joy, yes, but also the joy of being permitted to speak again. It had been a close thing, and everyone loves a close thing when it favors the little man. There were claps. There were more than claps. Oberyn took his foot off the man and lifted his spear and turned with a courtesy that belonged partly to himself and partly to the sister he had not let speak for him. He almost bowed. He did not. He took the long way toward Tyrion. A white cloak stepped into his path. The Kingsguard's face was pale and careful. "My prince?" The man began polite, the words chosen as carefully as fencing moves. "By law." "By law," Oberyn agreed pleasantly, his smile showing a line of teeth like the small bright fish you see near the surface of a still canal when the sun is right. He lifted one hand between them and indicated the dwarf 10 paces away. "We obey it. That is why we are here." He leaned very slightly closer, lowering his voice enough that only the pale man would hear. "And because I was promised a name, sir, as inclined as you are toward order, I expect you enjoy the completion of promises." He smelled the man's discomfort, chalk and something like cold milk, and moved on before the Kingsguard could reply. Tyrion had not moved at all. He stood as if carved in wood finer than any in the Red Keep, with eyes that had endured a great many jokes and were therefore ready for sorrow. When he finally spoke, his voice was politely hoarse. "You didn't need to say it," he began, and then stopped, because he did not know how to proceed with that sentence. His wit, when it returned, would be unsure of itself for a while. Oberyn, whose smile could become kindness when no one expected it, inclined his head. "No, I did not. He shifted the spear into his left hand and gave Tyrion his right. They shook hands like unlikely men in a story, one shorter and one tall, one wry and one wicked, both having survived themselves. Tyrion's hand was hotter than Oberyn expected. He held it half a beat longer than a formal handshake warranted, because he could. Then he let go, and left the half-beat there between them where it might become a memory. Above, Tywin Lannister finally moved, and the movement was like a landslide. The noise of chairs and guards and little indrawn breaths elsewhere in the gallery followed. He stood and he unbent his lips and spoke the words the law demanded. The law he had thought to yoke to his chariot and instead had to lead respectfully by the bridle. He said that Tyrion Lannister was free. He did not say it twice. He did not say anything about Dornish princes or about poison. He did not allow his eyes to go to Qyburn, who watched the dead giant with a longing like hunger, a student denied a book forever. Cersei did not stand. She stayed seated and her knuckles against the arm of the chair turned pale. She did not look at her father, because she already knew the line of his mouth, because she had a child to think of and a boy's name to anchor in her head. Tommen, 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 as if repetition could thicken the world and keep things away. She did not look at the Dornishman, either. She looked at her hands. After a while, she stood up and left without quite being seen to leave. Illyria exhaled slowly, and the breath came out as laughter because breath and laughter are first cousins. She had not told it which to become, and so it chose what it wanted. She let herself smile, teeth and lips, and the man below saw her and let his eyes alter into a thing only 2 or 3 people in his life had ever seen. Later, there were forms to observe. There are always forms. Signatures, acknowledgments, compliments that were barbs wrapped in silk and fruit that tasted of chalk because the people who offered it did not know how to season it, as if seasoning were a sin. Later there would be a dinner, offered not as celebration but as an argument with gravy, in which houses would be described as if they were dogs and hounds shall be bred with hounds to get the right hounds. Later there would be men who would say careful words like necessary and stability and now is not the time. Later, in a half-lit corridor, Oberyn would lean with his back to cool stone and let Illyria's hair fall against his forearm and remember, with a start, that he had come to this ugly city to be bored and a little wicked, and now he had done something that might become a hinge on which the island of the realm turned. For the moment there was sand on the floor of the yard and a dead giant in which the flies were beginning to take an interest, and there was a small man and a prince, and both of them could breathe. That was enough. They left by a quieter passage. Oberyn sent the spear away with one of his men, Daeron, a narrow fellow who had once killed 3 men in a wine shop with a broken jug. "Dry the blade," Oberyn told him. "Dry it as if it were your own good name. Then oil it with the light oil in the green bottle, not the heavy oil from the red bottle. Not the other way around." He said this because the order of things mattered more when they risked being messy. Tyrion walked at his side, 3 paces slower than his usual stride. Oberyn slowed with him, untroubled. The corridor smelled faintly of old rain and candle smoke and the wax some clever servant had used to disguise the smell of mold. "Do you intend to leave as soon as honor allows?" Tyrion asked dryly. He was not yet capable of lighter notes, but the form of a joke suited him. It was like a shirt that fit and warmed him. "I intend to be seen doing exactly as honor demands and no more," Oberyn said. "And then I intend to do as I please." He glanced down. "You are in need of wine." "If you say so," Tyrion said, and made his mouth twist. "I owe you more than wine." "You owe me entertainment," Oberyn said lightly, as if that were the same thing. "Some men repay life debts with cattle. I prefer stories." He touched Tyrion's shoulder, a brief, friendly pressure. "And perhaps, if you have any influence left in this house, a small table from which a certain dead man's name is taken with loss and offense. Not today. The woman with the yellow hair would bite me if I reached." "Cersei does not bite," Tyrion said, and then remembered she had, when they were children, once bitten him so deeply his fingers scarred for a fortnight. "Much. You see," Oberyn said, smiling. "Stories." While they spoke, the corridor turned left and then right and opened into one of those little courtyards the Red Keep contained like secrets. A square of sky, some scrubby herbs, a stone basin with still water and a dead moth on the surface. A cat lay on a step, and when it saw Oberyn it lifted its head and blinked and went back to sleep, because cats know princes when they see them and do not need to fawn. Varys appeared as if the walls had allowed him to seep out. He placed his hands together in a flutter and bowed. "My prince," he said, and then turned the bow toward Tyrion with equal elegance. "My lord, what a beautiful day. I confess I had feared it would end with very ugly punctuation." "Lord Varys," Oberyn said, as if greeting an old lover, "you were right about the venom and the iron." He looked at the spider with a level, friendly lack of temper. "I think the city would be prettier if it did not run on secrets like a mill on spilled grain." Varys' smile did not change. "What should it run on instead?" "My prince? Water," Oberyn said, "and shade. And women who are permitted to say what they wish, and men with less appetite for boys and for burning." Varys' smile changed, the way the light changes when a cloud moves. "I have always thought well of water," he said mildly. "As for shade, if you mean mercy, I applaud it. But this city thrives on habit, and habit is the oldest shadow." "You have made a profession of shadows," Oberyn said. "Tell me which shadows will fall now, since I do not live here." "Many," Varys said. His eyes slid toward Tyrion and back as smoothly as a fish stirring beneath a boat. "For one, a father has lost too many wagers. He will pay for it with calm and with illusions, which are coins he has in plenty. For another, a queen is a mother and will be more a mother tomorrow than today. That is dangerous because mothers kill more reasonably than fathers do, and are more patient in their work. For another, the poor have been reminded that the large can be made to fall, and the sound of it is wonderful to the ear. For another," he spread his soft hands, "the prince from the south has shown himself to be something more than a rumor and a whiff of orange peel, and he does not waste the opportunities that are the fruits of restraint." Tyrion made a small noise like a man clearing his throat when what he wants is to laugh. "He is very generous with you," he said to Varys. "He calls you a gentleman when others call you a rat." Varys did not seem wounded. "I am what I must be for the realm. I ask only that I be allowed to live through these days long enough to indulge in my other role, that of nosy old man." "Nosy old man," Oberyn repeated, amused. "Very well. Be nosy. Have a seat in my rooms tonight. I think I will have music." "Your rooms hum constantly already," Varys said, eyes twinkling. "One can hear your laughter from the bottom of the stairs like a bell out to sea." After he had gone, "Like fog does, not leaving edges of absence," Tyrion exhaled. "He terrifies me," he said frankly. "He terrifies no one with a spear," Oberyn said in the same tone. "Fear those, at least, whom you can reach with a length of wood. Between the two of us, I think we can pierce almost anyone in this keep, either with iron or with a sentence carefully selected." He let his gaze drift up to the square of sky. It was the bravest blue. "What will you do with your afternoon?" "Not hang," Tyrion said. After a moment he added more quietly, "Find Shay, if she is findable. Right to know. Drink, then think. It is a fine order if you've never tried it." "Try something else," Oberyn said, and his voice was gentle, though it wore his customary amusement as a cloak. "Write to the man with the gilt head you wish to love you. It will do you no good, but it will do you some good." He shrugged. "If that makes any sense." "You are a terrible man," Tyrion said, but his mouth had quirked. Oberyn's rooms did hum. Ilaria was at his table with her feet up and her hair unpinned, the mess of curls spilling like a net cast in a fountain. The sand snakes were scattered through the chambers as if they had grown there like plants. Obara had a wineskin under her arm and was telling a tale of the time she had slashed a Sellsword's ear in Myr because he called her a name beyond the standard list of insults. Nymeria had her dagger out and was cleaning her nails with it in a way that would have gotten someone else killed. The nail she cleaned was perfect. The dagger was also perfect. Tyene was painting her mouth with a pigment she had derived from a flower that grew only behind a certain cook's garden wall in Sunspear, and she held the little pot of it delicately. Like a secret, she would momentarily whisper. When they saw Oberyn, they made noises appropriate to victory, none of them gentle. Ilaria stood and came to him. She did not embrace him publicly. She put her forehead for a moment briefly against his cheek. Her breath smelled of grape, must, and mint. "You did not make me rage at you," she said. "I am surprised and insulted." "You may rage later," he said into her hair. "I do not rage in bed," she said. "You do other things then," he said, and bit her softly where her jaw met her ear. The sand snakes groaned in chorus at the familiar joke. "Father," Tyene said, sugar-sweet, "I brought the ointment for the blade. Daron will use too much. He always does." "He did last time," Oberyn agreed. "The spear does not like being sticky. It likes being clean. There is a difference." "Everything likes being clean," Ilaria murmured from somewhere near his shoulder. "Even cities." He put his hands on the table and leaned on it. The wood was warm from sun that had perched there all morning and gone away. "Give me the map," he said. They rolled it out. The old skin of the realm, inked into boundaries and mottled with thumbprints and spilled wine from 20 years of conversations. The north was big and sad. The islands looked like broken teeth. The riverlands trailed strips of blue that were mostly dreams. The reach was fat and smug. The stormlands were hunched and always wet. The westerlands were combed gold. Dorne, at the bottom, looked like a woman's face half turned from an unwanted hand. Oberyn put her thumb on King's Landing and pressed until the meat of her thumb turned pale. "Why should we not burn it?" she asked in her ordinary voice. "Because burning is a pleasure and therefore suspect as a policy," Oberyn said. "Also because there are more whores than lords in it, and more children than all. And because if you burn it, you must occupy the ash, which will soil your boots." Nymeria flicked her dagger, and it turned and landed with the point between the words Casterly and Rock. "This," she said. "Eventually," Oberyn said. Tyene put her little finger on Sunspear. "We begin here," she said. The fond in her voice made the city sound like a pet name. "We begin here," Oberyn agreed. "And we do not merely begin. We remember. I will write to my brother today. He will read the letter in his chair that has the carved dolphins, and he will not move for a long time, and then he will make a decision that will seem merely like an acceptance but will be an event. We go home in honor, which means with swords sheathed and alive men behind us and the city humiliated but unburned." His fingers roved southward on the map and stopped where the sea had been drawn in a hurry, waves indicated by lazy curls. "We speak of what we might do when next the realm demands something other than flattery and fear. We consider being the thing they demand." Oberyn's eyebrows rose. "We consider being a king?" "No," Oberyn said promptly. "Kings are dull. We consider being a cure. The realm is sick of the same medicine. It is tired of being beaten into order. Let us attempt the other treatment, charm and proof. Let us show the realm that it is possible to live without being frightened by lions and their teeth." "And if it prefers the teeth?" Nymeria asked without malice. "Then we shall pull them one by one until it is tired of bleeding," Oberyn said pleasantly. Ilaria's eyes had become darker as she listened. When most men talk like this, she thought they inhale and expand and the room must make space for them or suffocate. When he talked like this, he did not expand. He became quiet and made listeners lean in. He did not flatten the map with his hand. He stroked it as if to calm it. Tyrion came late, bringing with him a smell of dust and paper and uncertainty. He had changed his shirt for one that did not bear witness to anxiety. He sat without being asked and reached for wine, but not greedily. Oberyn watched him and put a hand on the pitcher before Tyrion's fingers found it, and just held it there, and the gesture was kindly and tyrannical at once. Then he poured and poured for everyone else first, and last poured for Tyrion, so that the dwarf's cup had to wait and could not be quickly emptied without looking rude. "Have you thanked your champion?" Ilaria asked Tyrion. She would have bitten anyone else who asked such a question, but here it was allowed. The city made people paint politeness over gratitude like a crude coat of whitewash. She preferred her walls vivid. "With poor sentences," Tyrion said. "I can do better when I have slept." "You may practice on me," Oberyn said. "Tell me anything other than I am generous." Tell me I am handsome, if you must play with the ordinary props. Tell me that I have made your father very tired. That would be welcome." "You have made him very tired," Tyrion said without inflection. He touched the map with a fingertip. "Are you planning his weariness like a campaign?" "I plan every man's weariness like a campaign," Oberyn said. "It is the only way to remove them without stabbing them and causing noise." Tyene sighed. "Noise," she said with affectionate disgust. "You are a lover of peace, father. Peace that smells of lemons and lamp oil and flesh that has been kissed," he said, smiling. "Not peace like a grave." He wrote to Dorne as the red light of afternoon slid along stone and softened people's foreheads into a human vulnerability. He wrote with a quill that liked to bite deeper than necessary, and he restrained it, and the ink gleamed like roe. He did not write a victory because he knew his brother did not care for spectacle. He wrote that the woman was not avenged because vengeance is equal to loss and there is no equality there. He wrote that a giant of the house that had ruined their sister lay dead and might remain so. He wrote that the law had been met with dexterity, and that dexterity had triumphed, and that the city murmured in tones like water. He wrote that he had found a little Lannister worth keeping. He wrote that there was an opening in the wall that had always been smooth as eggshell, and that he had placed his fingers into it and felt it yield. He wrote that he wished to come home for a while and walk among the water gardens and let the boys show him how well they could swim and the girls show him how well they could not drown. He wrote that he wished to propose a way of living that might seem to other men like insolence, but to him was merely the correct degree of air. He sealed it and set it on a platter for the steward, and then set the platter aside and pulled Ilaria onto his lap in a way that was no one else's business. Later he slept longer than he intended, splayed like a felt palm, the patterns of the shutters latticing his skin. He woke to darkness and the smell of sauced meat and a consciousness of being watched by someone who loved him and was trying not to laugh. "Your mouth is open," Ilaria said helpfully from the foot of the bed. "It is how I fish in my sleep," he said without opening his eyes. "Small dreams swim in and I swallow them whole." "You have swallowed enough small dreams," she said, and even in the dark he heard the smile. "Spit them out. There is something larger waiting." "The city?" he asked. "The night," she said. "It is waiting everywhere." He rose and dressed and ate and drank and kissed and listened. The people who came to him that night, singers and petty nobles and a woman who kept a cookshop and knew everything that happened in a particular alley, and a blacksmith with hands like mallets and a sell-sail whose ship had gone and whose debts had remained, and 3 girls with hair like different kinds of honey, and a man who had not spoken in several months and wanted to say everything, never quite understood how much he was learning from them. He told jokes. He forgot names and pretended not to have forgotten. He told a story about a prince in Volantis who had kept a bear in his fountain and given it figs, and then one afternoon the bear had decided to walk away and everyone had screamed as if the bear were a sin that would contaminate them by not obeying. He watched and thought. There were patterns he could live with here. There were devastations he could not. In the morning, the city woke with less rancor than usual. A giant had fallen and people of all sizes enjoyed knowing it. The bakers overbaked the first loaves because they were talking. The gold cloaks leaned on their spears without trying to hide their idleness. A fishmonger at the mud gate actually laughed at a guard who tried to push him into the gutter, and the guard, unprepared for that sound, merely shook his head and went away, collecting his dignity along the stones. Tywin sent a message before midday. He did not write often, writing is a kind of surrender, but today he wrote, and the letters had the compressed feeling of things the writer will never forget. He invited the Prince of Dorne to a private meal at his convenience so that he might be thanked and honored for his role in the cause of justice and law. He underlined none of the nouns. Oberyn read it twice, kissed Ilaria on the shoulder, and went at once. Tywin's rooms were lit as if they had not been opened to the sun in 10 years, though the day was white-hot beyond the shutters. The air smelled of vellum and spice and learned cruelty. A dish sat on the table. Lamb with something dark on it that was supposed to suggest generosity. There was wine. No one drank it. Tywin looked like a man who would rather cut his own hair with a dagger than acknowledge a mistake. And yet here he was, carving gratitude into meat. "My prince," he said, very nearly bending his iron into courtesy. The realm is served by men who understand that law is the spine and mercy the flesh. And poison the blood, Oberyn said, smiling to make it a joke. He let the older man have a fraction of a pause to consider whether to laugh. He did not laugh. We do not prevent our enemies from making accusations, Tywin said in that particular heavy tone that suggests a hand has been laid on a heavy animal to keep it gentle. But we do not need to answer them. Men of importance are often subjected to calumny. That is a lovely word, Oberyn said. It smells of laundry. Tywin met his eyes. I would be less happy about this outcome were I a man to permit myself happiness, he said. But I prefer it to the alternative. The city would have bled. Now it does not. You have my thanks. I have your thanks, Oberyn agreed. He put his hands behind his back and looked around the room the way a man looks around a temple he does not worship in, appreciating the design. And I have a question. Tywin's lids lowered a fraction. Ask it. If I wish to bring 50 of my men from Dorne into the city to visit its fountains and its rotten fish and its good wines and keep as decent company as men of Dorne ever keep, will you permit it? There have been objections in the past when we have walked in the wrong rooms. You are a prince, Tywin said. You may bring twice 50, as long as they remember where they are and do not mistake this city for your deserts. The deserts are more forgiving, Oberyn said. He turned his head, looked at the plate of meat, did not touch it. Here is the thing that keeps me in your shadowed room, my lord. I am not fond of cruelty that is tidy. I do not like things done behind hangings. Your city is full of tapestries. It is full of rooms like this one. He gestured slightly and with the gesture indicated shampooed rugs, expensive table legs, all the apparatus of wealth. I will accept whatever men like you need to do to keep boards under your feet. I am not foolish, but if you must drown people, drown them in the river where everyone can see. That is my tax. Tywin stared at him blankly, not because he did not understand, but because he understood too well. He was not accustomed to anyone asking for something other than coin or office. Whether he agreed or refused would be a narrative. After a while he said, "The river is very dirty. It is not a place for making fine points." "Then at least tell the city when you have killed someone," Oberyn said. "I will say it in my country's words. Stand beside the body and speak. It is a courtesy to the dead and to the living." He smiled again, a little more wolf now. "Do not forget that there are more of the latter." "You will go home soon," Tywin said, as if that were a solution. "I will, yes," Oberyn said. "I find myself wanting to love my home with a new profession. I have been lazy with it. I intend to be less lazy." After the meal, during which no one ate more than one bite, Oberyn stood and bowed with precise beauty. He left the room without turning his back, because he did not trust the air in that space not to hold blades, and because he enjoyed looking like a dancer in a house where dancing was a euphemism for disapproval. He went next to the sept, not to pray, but because the sept was the place where women who had lost children went to breathe. He sat at the back and watched them and let the river of their grief move past him. An old river he had crossed 1,000 times and would cross 1,000 more, and he named the names he cared about in his head one by one. Then he stood and went to the docks. The water was the color of tarnished coin. It burped. A ship lay with its belly open, men passing casks down a human chain like hearts and veins. A boy gaped at Oberyn's clothes and then gaped again at his smile. Oberyn walked back and forth and listened to sailors cursing in half a dozen languages and thought about sails he would need soon and the kind of wind he would hope for. In the evening, he returned to find Tyrion with Jaime in his rooms, both of them looking like versions of the same man separated by damage and gold. They were drinking badly, each trying to accommodate the other's way of holding pain. Jaime's left hand, the only one now, rested on his knee as if it knew no better place to be. Tyrion was telling a story about an old brothel keeper who had taught him arithmetic better than any maester. "Prince Oberyn," Jaime said carefully when he entered, as if the name were a taste he had to judge. "My thanks for—" He stopped, because gratitude from him to anyone was a garment he was not practiced in. "For not being careless," he finished, surprising himself. I am careless usually, Oberyn said, drawing a chair up and sitting too close by the standards of men who think distance a virtue. It makes the times I am not less predictable. He looked at Jaime's stump, and then at Tyrion's eyes, and he opened his mouth to say something that would surely have hurt and then turned to another topic. I am going home, he said simply. Soon. You have done enough damage, Tyrion said. Not enough, Oberyn said. Not yet. Later. But first, construction. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and smiled a smile that was not kind. Listen to me while you can. Your house has a reputation for teeth. It has less of one for tongues. Learn to speak lower. Say less. Whisper to only 2 people, and do not be a father to more than 1 son. That always ruins such men as you. It divides your plans and multiplies your sorrow. You talk like a priest when you are tired, Jaime said, with something almost like humor. I suppose that is the time when the rest of us pray. Pray, Oberyn said gently. It is exercise for the mind with no violence except against illusions. When they had gone, he lay awake. Ilaria slept with her hand on his stomach, her breath regular and soft. He thought of the water gardens, the long pools like sheets of light, the small bare feet on warm stone, the way Doran's face softened when boys kicked water at him despite their nurse's hiss. He thought of the lists of names that had been recited in the halls of Sunspear, names of men whose bodies had been cut, who had been given back to the sand with careful ceremony after old crimes had been discovered like bones a dog brings proudly. He thought of a document he could write, words that might be boring and therefore safe, letters that would be folded into laws that would outlive him. He thought of the way the small folk in King's Landing had breathed easier in the market that morning because a giant had gone down. He fell asleep thinking about air, and what it would be to carry it north along the roads like a thing he could pour. He dreamed of a flag he could not quite see the picture on, moving with the salt wind beyond the mouth of the Greenblood. They went home with a company that was both too large and not large enough. They went with music because he insisted on it. They went with the small Lannisters' laughter in their baggage and the Kingslayer's stare in their mirror. They went through the Prince's Gate when the guards had not yet finished saying they did not have orders to let them pass, because of the way he smiled and because his spear was clean and because the city had had its fill of dead men this week. They went with the blessing of a spider and the curse of a queen. They went under a sky that had decided it was summer for real now, not merely a pretense. They stopped in the Reach because a woman with a hat like a small moving garden wanted to talk to him. Lady Olenna had the eyes of a hawk who had been a hawk for 90 years and had forgotten how to be anything else. She offered him cakes and called him by the wrong names on purpose and was delighted when he corrected her without permitting himself annoyance. She said, "You disrupted things," as if she were telling him he'd moved a fork. "They remain themselves," he said. "I jostled. The thing about jostling is that if you do it enough, a person's water spills," she said. "I approve. I do it myself. My lords think I fuss with linen. I upturn pails." She looked at him carefully, and her mouth tucked into itself. "You are going to try to save the world," she said in a tone that meant you fool. "No," he said. "I am going to try to save a piece that is mine. If that inconveniences the world, I will not apologize." "Very good," she said. "I have such hopes of you as a trouble. The house with lions is very boring when no one bites it." "I will not bite them yet," he said. "I intend to send them a letter with a flower pressed into it first." She cackled. "Send them a cactus," she advised. They went on. The Stormlands hissed rain at them and then sun, and the sky above the Dornish marches went the particular deep color it goes only there, like soaked wool. The road forgot things and remembered them again. They passed villages where people shook out rugs, and children waved because the men on the horses were not wearing lion badges and not sneering as they passed, and because the man with the copper skin smiled for anyone who looked up at him. The wind found his hair. The wind brought him messages he wrote down at night in an unsteady hand. Where the roads were broken, who had taken goats, who had sworn to one banner and yet quietly drifted toward another. He was not a general. He was a man learning the realm's throat with his fingers. As they entered Dorne, the air changed. The sun was the same and not the same. The taste of the wind was the taste of the particular sea he loved, which had a bitterness other seas do not. The land opened into the white bone of roads whose dust had a memory of women's feet. They sent riders ahead, and by the time they were halfway to Sunspear, children had begun to collect along the path, and women in scarves, and old men who had served his father, and young men who would serve someone else soon. They cheered. They did not cheer because a giant had died. They cheered because a man who made jokes and carried a clean spear had returned. They cheered because home had an appetite for itself that day. Doran met him in the water gardens, as he had known he would. He met him in that long pavilion of cool stone where pillars perched like cranes. Doran had a book in his lap, and his fingers lay on it like leaves. He rose not quite easily and came forward and embraced his brother, and Oberyn breathed in the particular scent of him. Fresh water, something medicinal, a lemon cut on a knife that had recently cut chicken. They held each other longer than nobles do, and the boys in the pool held their breath to see how long grown men can stay underwater without dying. "My patience was rewarded," Doran said quietly when they had sat, and servants had brought them water in cups that sweated and then withdrawn. "I would have accepted your death, as I have accepted other things. I would have hated it. I did not die," Oberyn said. "It will inconvenience some of the stories told about me." He wrung his shirt out at the hem with 2 fingers to make bright dots on the stone. "I want to try something." Doran smiled faintly. "You always do. Something that lasts after me?" Oberyn said, and the faintness in Doran's smile faded. He leaned forward. He listened. Oberyn told him, with fewer jokes than usual and more patience, what he wanted to write. He wanted to write rules that would become as dry and trustworthy as bread and salt. He wanted the women in Dorne to be able to keep what they owned, and to keep their names safe, and to tell judges the truth at the same table where men did. He wanted his bastard daughters to be legitimate by announcement rather than by bribes and marriages. He wanted the men who sat on benches in little towns to know that when soldiers came with demands and badges, they were not required to say yes. He wanted the governors of ports to understand that when ships with lion banners wanted to steal men into service, it would be called theft and not law. He wanted the fruit sellers to pay less to the officials who came to weigh their scales. He wanted to write a list of things Dorne will not do because it is wrong, and a list of things Dorne will do because it is right, and he wanted to make it all so boring that only men who hate boredom would come to try to argue, and those men could be given cups of cold water and told to sit down and talk reasonably or leave. Doran listened. His palms stayed flat on the book. His eyes, which were often like wells with moss around them, became pools where small animals stooped to drink. When he spoke, he did so slowly, which he had always done partly because of pain and partly because he loved the shape of precise thought. "You wish to play at being a maester," he said, but there was pride in his mouth. "You wish to take your spear and stick it through paper and pin things to the table. You wish to make order." "I wish to make air," Oberyn said. "I wish to push air into the lungs of this country so that when it must run, it runs long and not merely fast." "Yes," Doran said simply. "Yes, we will do it. Write it and I will read it. Read it to me and I will say no and no and then yes enough for you to feel anger and then relief. It will be better that way." Ilaria came behind a pillar and laughed. "Listen to them," she said to the closest of the boys, who was half out of the pool and dripping like a little fish. "They will speak of such things for hours. Tell me, should we bring them figs or knives?" "Figs," the boy said devoutly, "because figs are always right." They wrote. They wrote in rooms that smelled of river water and cool stone and ink that refused to dry in humidity. They sent for men who knew how money moved through a city. They sent for women who kept the keys to storerooms. They sent for elders and for girls with clear eyes. They consulted a priest of the mother who believed almost purely in compassion and almost not at all in ceremony. They consulted a captain who believed in ceremony and kept his compassion like a hidden horse that would be brought out only for a particular special rider. They argued and laughed and paused while Oberyn remembered a line of poetry that would do, and then cut it because poetry only belongs in law when the law is otherwise unbearable. They wrote some things and then struck them out. They refused gifts from men who thought gifts would improve the document's FL. They sent messages. They received messages from beyond the Boneway, beyond the marches, beyond any place polite. The raven from King's Landing came after 2 weeks. It bore a neat request from the new hand for the Prince of Dorne to return to court so that a matter of the king's peace might be concluded. The language was precise, the courtesy exact. It was a net laid by a fisherman who had never had to go into the water himself. Oberyn read it aloud and stared at the last line for a long time and then laughed, delighted, as if he had been offered a sweet when he had not expected it. "They find they need me," he said. "They find they need the idea of me. I am becoming a remedy." "Beware of being a remedy," Dorne said, opening his book and then closing it again. "Men will insist they are sick when they are bored." "We can cure boredom also," Oberyn said cheerfully, "with lemons and good sex and simple bread." He went north again, for the letter made it impossible not to. He took fewer men this time and more women. He took papers with the beginnings of laws and a list and ink he knew would leak in his saddlebag and stain his shirt. He took Obara and Nymeria and Tyene and said yes when Sarella begged and said no to the littler ones and bore the storm of their insult with laughter. He took Ilaria and said to her in the night privately, "Keep me from smiling at the wrong time," and she said with equal seriousness, "Always." The road felt familiar now the way a song becomes familiar after you hear it twice in different moods. The sky was a great canvas and he thought of it as a thing he might write on. Word spread that he was coming and word spread that he had come and word spread that he had passed, and in his wake a certain kind of talk began to happen in inns where such talk had never been heard because people had been tired from carrying sacks of flour and from being careful. They said, "What if?" They said, "What if men did not have to bribe the guard to get permission to sell apples near the docks?" They said, "What if women could own boats?" They said, "What if I did not have to duck my head when a bannerman went by?" They said, "What if the law spoke in my accent?" In King's Landing the air tasted of ashes because on the way someone had burned something too big, perhaps by accident, perhaps because someone else had offended a man who found fire easier than reason. The sky was indifferent to this. The Red Keep was not. It made its own weather regardless of clouds. He saw Cersei first. It was a small room where she had gathered 3 women who were not her friends for a purpose that might be terrible or merely cruel. He could never tell with her because the difference did not matter to her. She stood like a flag of a house with no motto. She said, without the courtesy of a good day, "It was poison. It was inevitability," he said pleasantly. "Poison makes inevitability quicker and more honest. You are welcome. You think the city will thank you," she said through her teeth. "The city thanks no one. It eats." "You are not the city," he said. "You are its throat. We might make sure it swallows less of the people and more of the garbage." He moved past her gently, a man in a crowded market passing a mule. He saw Tommen after that, a boy who had a boy's attempt at a crown solidity. The crown itself was too big and the weight of it made his brows try to become older than the rest of his face. He stood stiffly because no one had taught him how to stand differently. He was gentle and would grow into it. Oberyn saw at once how that gentleness could be hardened into something worse than cruelty. He bowed to the boy as if to a child playing a good game very seriously. "I am told you understand the need for air," he said. Tommen looked at his mother, and then at the hand, and then at the floor, and then at Oberyn again, and said, "I am told that Dorne has fountains that anyone can put his feet in, even if he is not rich." "Yes," Oberyn said. "Anyone. If you come to visit. We have a rule about little boys in fountains. They must be watched so they don't drown. That is a mother's job and a father's job, and sometimes it is the job of everyone around, when the mother and father are tired or dead." Tommen's mouth made a small O. It was not an unkind thing to say. It was simply true. The boy opened his mouth to ask a question and then shut it. He had already learned that questions were dangerous. That was the first rule Oberyn wanted to teach him to break. "Leave us," Tywin said then in a voice that made everyone in the room want to obey, and Tommen made to go and Cersei made to stay, and there was a brief, brittle pause where the fate of small kingdoms can change if you shout or do not shout. Oberyn rescued the moment by going toward the window and looking out, as if the window were an incredibly interesting animal. The others took the chance to leave and collect themselves and put on new faces. "You wish to write to me with advice," Tywin said when the door had closed. He did not sit. He did not invite Oberyn to sit. Do so. I will read it. He said, read with a contempt that meant, why are you alive? I have brought advice large enough to be boring, Oberyn said softly. You will find it agreeable because it makes your city run more smoothly. You will find it intolerable because it will change who is permitted to give orders. Tywin's eyes flickered toward Cersei, whose hands had made fists without meaning to. He said nothing. He gestured slightly for the papers. Oberyn handed them over one by one, and each one felt like a little desert bird in flight. Varys stood in a corner and became furniture. When the old man's eyes lowered to the text, the spider's eyes danced. He did not grin because he did not grin. He did not clap because he did not clap. He looked at the Prince of Dorne with a private adoration, as one aesthete looks at another across a crowded gallery when both you understand the painting no one else even notices. You think our laws care for the poor, Cersei said coldly. They do not. Their purpose is other. Their purpose has been to keep certain families certain, Oberyn agreed. Perhaps it is time to keep certain people certain instead. Those who cook, those who draw water, those who can mend a dog, and those who can build a bridge. In cities where such people are not allowed to make decisions, women like you must become terrifying just to breathe. She did not slap him because his timing was delicate and because Tywin's eyes forbade it and because she had already learned this week that she could not always simply be a knife. She turned and strode away and the room bent a little and then straightened, as rooms do when a storm passes. Tywin read and handed a sheet to Pycelle, and Pycelle made the face of a man being asked to swallow a firefly. He read and handed it back and changed his mind about gossip he had intended to spread by nightfall. He read and muttered the word equity under his breath, as if someone had put a piece of fruit in his mouth he had not ordered. What price? Tywin asked, finally, not moving his eyes from the page and not looking up when he asked it. He meant, what must I give to make you take your trouble elsewhere? No price, Oberyn said. Privilege. Put our name in the document as if we mattered as much as you do. Say that Dorne does this and you support it, and that if other regions wish to do similar you will not stand in their way. That way when people say, see, our king belongs to lions, they will have to add, and to sons. And that will annoy them, and the annoyance will distract them from sharpening knives. You think like water, Tywin said, and his mouth almost smiled and then did not, and his fingers bent the paper and unbent it. Very well, I will say some of it. Some of it I will not. Say any of it and I will write songs about you, Oberyn said. Children will sing them in water that is not yours. It is the only immortality I will promise. He spent a month in the city teaching the idea of air to people who had never met it, and failing sometimes, and causing other men to speak his name in unpleasant ways. He walked among the carts and the ditches and the places where water pooled and mildew grew. He bought pastries from a woman whose husband had been killed by a gold cloak when the man tried to keep for himself a coin he had found. And he brought the woman up the hill to the hand to tell her story, and the hand made the face of a man at a play, and what happened afterward behind a tapestry could not be known. But the guard was never again seen in that city. He accepted that he would not know and hated that he would not know and accepted that he hated. He lost a friend in a gambling den one night because someone with a dagger and a grievance misplaced both. He did not weep. He wept later in Illyria's hair, when there was no one left to make a tidy story of it. He met Brienne of Tarth. He sparred with her for the delight of it, not for triumph, and afterward they sat with their bare feet in a tub of cold water and shared a loaf, and he laughed when she said, gravely, "You are fond of the world," and he answered, "I am. It has been good to my hands." He went to the September a second time and a third. He learned the names of the women who lit the candles. He gave them coin when they refused it, and then kept it, and then bought oranges with it and ate them on the steps, and they laughed at him like grandmothers. One afternoon he felt a woman sit beside him without looking at him. "My father thought you would die," she said. "He wanted you to, so that he could keep believing the story about how justice works." "What story is that?" he asked kindly, not turning his head. "The one where cruel men are safe," she said. "I have no stories like that." "Nor I," he said. He did not ask her name. She knew his. It was enough. He took the king to the fountain in the gardens behind the Red Keep. He let the boy sit on the rim and take off his boots. He kept the guards at a distance with a smile and the weight of Illyria's gaze. He told Tommen a story about a turtle in the river that had never seen the sea and asked the river to tell it what salt was like, and the river had all the right answers but none of them were salt. And the boy said, "Yes," very softly, and looked at the water on his toes, and then at a page and said, "Do they let orphans swim there?" And Oberyn said, "Yes, the women who watch the fountains often pretend not to see the orphans." And the boy laughed, and it made him beautiful. When he rode south finally, he carried more letters than he had brought and felt the weight of them differently. Some contained agreements. Some contained refusals he accepted as proof of progress. Some were invitations to come to High Garden or Riverrun and talk under vines. One was a threat written in too elegant a hand and smelling faintly of cloves. He whistled when he read that one and then folded it into the lining of his saddle as if it were a talisman. The day they crossed back into Dorne, it was high summer. The road had learned their names by now and called to the horses. At a little village as they neared the Greenblood, a woman with a baby in a sling came and stood in front of him and said, "Is it true?" And he said, "It is sometimes true," because he had learned not to make reputations into promises. She nodded and moved away, and he went on. At Sunspear, the hall filled with people who had not been ordered but came because the room where decisions are made is more interesting than the room where dinner is served. Oberyn stood on the dais not because he loved heights but because being seen is a tool, and if you do not use your tools they go blunt. Dorne sat. Illyria stood back with the sand snakes like a shadow made of sunlight. The sea showed through the open arches like a blue muscle flexing and relaxing, and Neve.
Tiring.
He began to speak not with the words about law, but with a story about Elia. He told it not as tragedy, which it was, but as origins. He told it quietly, in a voice that dropped and broke and then came together. He did not permit weeping from anyone else because he did not show any himself except in the thin line he drew across his face with a breath when he spoke his sister's name. He used that story to say the next thing, that Dorne would not be anyone's creature, that Dorne's women's names were stones, that Dorne's men's promises were water that changed shape instead of breaking, that Dorne would write words that would outlast the people who spoke them. Then he read portions of something he and Dorne had made, reading not all of it because the worst thing a man can do is try to make everything new in one afternoon. He read that women could hold property and pass it. He read that no child born should be called anyone's bastard in law. He read that men with swords could not take a woman from her house or a boy from a boat without showing a paper with 3 signatures or else be called thief and be treated accordingly. He read that rulers must declare when they had killed with name and reason. He read about fountains, yes, fountains, and where they should be built next so that every person in the long hot towns might put their feet in water and remember something more than work. The room was silent at the end. Then there was a sound like a breath taken by a giant who had just been allowed to stop working. Men shouted. Women did not shout. They hummed, a hum with teeth in it. The sand snakes smiled their private smiles. Dorne sighed and closed his eyes in the exact way of a man tasting a fruit he has grown himself. It began afterward, the thing that would later be called by the poets and the liars, who are sometimes the same, the freeing. It did not begin with flags. It began with a man in a little town refusing a noble with a smirk and 2 men behind him, one of whom had a patch over an eye, who had come to take a young girl to a castle because the lord there had a taste. The man held a copy of a new law with signatures, and he held it so tightly his knuckles made a row of small bones. The noble laughed because laughter had always been enough, and the man did not laugh, and a neighbor came with a second copy and stood beside him, and a third, and soon the men behind the noble understood that the law had made knives appear in men's eyes and nothing else was necessary that day. No blood, just the movement of a thing that cannot be moved if men do not lean, and enough men leaned. Word traveled as it does along rivers and along roads, shabby and quick. In Plankytown 2 boys climbed a rope they had not been allowed to climb and dropped like fish into the Greenblood laughing because there was a woman there who had read a paper and said, "Yes, today." And because in the afternoon she took the same paper to a merchant who had been skimming coin from the Menders Guild for 7 years, and he paid back the coin with interest and did not complain because he enjoyed his thumbs. In the shadow of the Boneway, A widow showed her paper to a cousin who had contested her house after her husband died and told him where the law now sat and in whose lap. And he grumbled, but he put down his claim and left, because the law had found a favor with a man in a chair of dolphins and behind him a man with a spear, and even stubborn cousins learn arithmetic. Oberyn did not govern this movement as a king governs a campaign, with messengers and maps only. He put his feet in it. He went to small places. He drank the beer that was always warm and never good. He sat under a fig tree while a woman told him about a man who had come to weigh her scales unfairly, and he weighed the scales himself with pebbles and said that the pebbles had names, and he put those names on a paper with his beautiful hand and signed it, and the next time the man came there was a tale waiting for him, and he went away and did not come back. He sent singers out with new songs and new jokes. He seduced 2 officials into honesty and 3 into retirement. He picked fights with a lordling and made him look ridiculous with a story told at the right dinner. He hauled water at a fountain one morning and handed cups to anyone, and the women there laughed and said, "Prince, your shoulders are soft." And he laughed and said, "They have done other hard things, leave them be." He gave the boys in the water gardens more boats and fewer lessons they hated. He chose a girl from among them who could climb trees faster than any of the boys and wrote to a ship captain to teach her ropes because she did not wish to marry, and he looked forward to the day when she would write to him from a cold northern bay saying, "You have made something foolish possible." He wrote to the widow of the waterfront in Old Town simply because it pleased him to imagine her reading his words. He wrote to the Black Brothers on the wall because he liked men who lived at the edge of things, and told them he would send them salt fish and law if they wanted either, and they wrote back and asked for the fish. When he slept, he dreamed not of skulls but of the way a paragraph looked when it settled at last, and a roomful of people nodded as if relief had come. When he dreamed of his sister, she no longer stood with her hair unbound in a room where a door had been broken. She sat by a fountain and scolded him for forgetting his sandals. She told him again and again, "Do not look only at where you want to jump. Look at where you will land." He agreed. He had learned that lesson. He would learn others. One autumn afternoon, with the fountains flickering small and the shadows of the palm leaves sharp on stone, he sat in the shade of a colonnade and considered the next act in this long patience. He wrote down words that began the shape of a charter not just for Dorne but for anyone who see art to read. He wrote that a realm could be ruled by something other than fear, and that such rule would not look like a king. It would look like people in markets looking each other in the eye. He wrote that freedom is not a flag. It is a habit. He wrote that habit requires repetition, and repetition requires will, and will requires stories, and that he would make such stories until his voice failed. Then he put his quill down and watched a child in the courtyard bend and scoop up a beetle and carry it carefully to the shade so that it would not cook on the hot stone. The good, the small good. He thought of all the small goods he wanted to string together like beads into something large enough to wear into winter. He did not know yet that an envoy from the north would arrive with news that would tug at that string and make 1,000 beads scatter. He did not know yet that in the Vale, a woman with knives in her smile had begun to say his name the way one tastes a fruit one might love or poison. He did not know yet that across the sea a woman with dragons had asked someone to tell her about a prince who had killed a giant and written a law. He only knew the day was clear and the work was beautiful, and he had not died when a giant's gauntlets might have met his head like hands meeting a melon. That ignorance was not bliss. It was pause. He was good at pauses. He had learned them in a hot ring of sand. He used them now to inhale and to exhale and to say his sister's name without bitterness, and to think about boats and letters and the exact shape of a sentence that would make a boy in a far town feel a little taller when he read it to his mother. When the message finally came, sweat-streaked rider, horse white-eyed, the sun was lower and the water in the nearest pool was beginning to reflect sky that had a hint of evening. The man slid off his horse before the attendants could help and thrust a leather tube out like an accusation. Oberyn took it. He broke the seal. He read. Ellaria watched his face go still, which she had seen it do only 3 times in their life together. She came close but did not touch him because he was listening to something inside him that was too busy for hands. He looked up at Dorne, who had been sitting farther back, and up at Oberyn, who had already reached for her spear, and at Nymeria, whose pupils had widened to accommodate knives, and at Tyene, who smiled when she was preparing poison or peace. He looked last at Ellaria, as one looks last at water before setting out into a place with little of it. "They are asking for us," he said. "Not for me, for us. Not to bring justice to a single house or to sit in a court and tell jokes. They are asking for us to bring air north of the desert. There is a boy there." He forced a little laugh. "Always a boy. There is a boy, and there is a wall, and there are winter stories. And there are men who have remembered how to kneel in a way that cracks their knees. They are saying, 'Come.'" Ilaria stepped into his space as if no one else existed and wiped a smear of ink from the edge of his wrist with her thumb. "Then we go," she said simply. "We bring the habit." He exhaled. He inhaled. He heard the old music beginning to play. A rattle skittering across stone, the argument of leather, the throat's first word. He reached for his spear, though it was not needed. He always reached for it when the world tilted. His face filled with light. "We will not invade," he said. "We will only arrive. We will arrive with laws and songs and water. And only then, if they insist, we will arrive with the other thing." He smiled, all his teeth and all his charm and all his practiced patience and all his rage arranged into a shape he could carry without it tearing him. "Let us see if the realm has grown tired of being ruled by fear. Let us make it tired of its hunger." He stepped out of the shade and into the square of sun. The stone accepted his feet. Somewhere, far off, the sea turned over like a great beast finding a new position in sleep. The prince who had not died was alive, and he was not done.